In this week's video, we're talking about non-native invasive species, how to identify them, how to treat them, and why it's important that you manage them on your property.
Mossy Oak Properties, where outdoorsmen find their favorite place.
We're going to start today's show off with a question for you, Eric Long.
Yes!
The question for you is as follows. When you think of the tools in a wildlife manager's toolbox, the projects that they can complete on a piece of property, what are the first ones that come to mind?
Oh, the tools in the management toolbox. One of the most popular ones, obviously, behind us is a food plot. Everybody loves food plots, you know? Everyone likes playing farmer. But then you have, timber stand improvement. You have old field type management. You have warm season grasses / pollinators, and then water holes, and pine plantings, soft hard mass plantings. So that's basically what's in your management toolbox.
But to me, the missing component is what might be, and it is in my opinion, the most important thing a landowner can do on their property when managing for wildlife, and that is controlling non-native invasive species.
Absolutely, hands down. Why? I'm guilty of it, to leave that tool at home. I don't know what it is about it that it's a lot of work, Cody.
It is a lot of work.
It's a lot of work and dedication.
You got to have the desire to do it. It's not for the faint of heart, but I think it's, when we're talking long term, which that's what wildlife management is about. It's, you've said it, we all say it. Never about the now, always about the future.
Absolutely.
So that's what we're going to talk about today, managing non-native invasive species on your property and why it should be at the top of your to-do list.
One thing, when you tackle any type of management technique, that's going to cause a disturbance, whether it's cutting or creating an old field environment, you have to be honest with yourself. It's like, I want to do a 2-acre opening, create an old field environment inside of the woods. Let's just pick that for example. It's not a money issue, it's a time issue. Do I have time to do the prep before and or after? Because if you don't, either scale it down or try to come up with another thing. Because when you do a cut, and if you don't go in there and you have all this like tree of heaven, this ailanthus, for example, picking one invasive that we have a problem with throughout the country, at least in the east, it outcompetes other species that you're trying to promote. So if you don't have a really good game plan, and it goes back to time. Sometimes either scale it down smaller where you can control it, and or just really, I'll be honest with you, I'd rather you not do it, so that way you're not fighting invasives in the future. Before
you get out in the field and actually start doing work managing non-native invasive species, consult with a professional, have a certified forester come out to your property, a private lands biologist, somebody who can first and foremost really help you identify the problematic non-native invasives on your property, because it's actually pretty interesting. They vary from property to property. You could be on a certain piece of property and it's chock full of autumn olive. You go a mile down the road and there's no autumn olive, but it's all Japanese stiltgrass and ailanthus. And more than anything, identifying the correct species and knowing how to treat them before you even get started is step number one, because ailanthus trees are tree of heaven. If you don't know any better, they're very much a look-alike to poplar trees, especially when they're younger. The bark, texture, color, everything is very, very similar. Japanese barberry and multifloral rose looks extremely similar to blackberry. We want a lot of blackberry. It's very beneficial to all wildlife and humans who like to eat blackberries, myself included. We don't want Japanese barberry, we don't want multifloral rose. So knowing the difference between those species, having somebody out, certified forester, somebody who knows what they're doing, a professional in this line of work who can help you identify what we want, beneficial species, what we want to encourage, and what we want to get rid of, and to identify the differences between each should be step number one before you fire up the sprayer or get to work, because if you're not careful, you can do more harm than good. There are actually several different techniques that you can use to control the non-native invasives on your property, and a lot of it depends on the species, the size of the plant, time of year, and and when and how you can go about employing each technique. And on this ailanthus tree, this is actually a pretty decent sized one. You can see we double girdled it, just took the chainsaw. You're only cutting an inch into the cambium, doesn't take much. Just barely cutting 2 rings around the tree, and we're treating it with herbicide after the fact. So this is a good method that I like to use on bigger trees, because if you're hacking and squirting, which is another technique, I mean you're hacking and hacking and hacking and squirting and squirting and squirting. With just a chainsaw and a squirt bottle, you can knock out a handful of these trees. My dad and I did, oh gosh, 150 to 200 in a couple hours last year of these ailanthus trees. I would run the chainsaw, he would follow behind with the squirt bottle. Even if you're doing it by yourself, just make a couple rings around the tree, squirt your herbicide in the wound, and that tree is dead and just doesn't know it yet. And this is a good example right here. Again, another reason to contact a certified forester or your private lands biologist and get them out there so they can walk you through the different species, because this is an ailanthus tree. And right behind it is a poplar tree. And if you're unfamiliar with your tree species, I mean, that tree's been dead for over a year, so it's starting to darken and look dead. But when it was alive and strong, it's almost an identical twin to a poplar tree. I mean, same texture, same smooth bark, same coloration. And an important thing to keep in mind specific to Tree of Heaven, and it's just another reason to talk with a certified forester or a private lands biologist and have him or her school you on the species and how they respond to different kinds of treatment. Like this Tree of Heaven, if I were just to come in here and just cut it clean off and think that that killed it, I did nothing but to upset it and piss it off and make it angry. If I were to just cut this tree clean off and just leave it there, it would stump sprout very angrily. There would be literally probably 100 little saplings, little shoots coming off the root system. Ailanthus, to give them some credit, they are very aggressive and they don't like being messed with. That's why they can take over a stand so quickly. But it's something to keep in mind. Like I said, when managing non-native invasives, if you're not careful, you can actually do more harm than good. And we can't stress this enough, is to speak with a certified forester or a professional and have him or her walk you through the steps in the process. But like I said, on this tree, we double girdled, treated with herbicide. It is dead, thankfully. It makes me feel really good, but you can also hack and squirt on smaller trees like this poplar right here. I mean, this is a smaller tree. It would be more trouble to carry a chainsaw to girdle 2 rings around this tree, put it down, pick up the herbicide bottle and squirt around it twice. On a tree of this size, it's easier to just carry a hatchet or a machete. You want to make a cut for every 3 inches of diameter. You're making a hack, just a little bit of herbicide in the wound, a hack for every 3 inches of diameter, like I said, and that tree would be dead. Another tree of this size, this is about as big as that I would want a basil spray. But a basil spray is just basically mixing, again, certified forester, depending on the species, they will educate you on what type of herbicide to use and when. But a basil spray is basically, you'll want to mix it with a crop oil or a penetrating oil. Diesel fuel is probably the cheapest, and it's what I use the most often. But you're just spraying a ring 360 degrees around the trunk of the tree, probably 18 to 24 inches up high. And you're really just painting the base of the tree with the herbicide and the fuel. And on trees of this size or smaller, that's a really effective way to kill those trees standing and basically kill them without letting them know that they're going to die, which is always a satisfying work, is doing the work and then coming back after the fact and seeing them dead. There's no better feeling.
So after you did all that hard work, you put all the time and effort into doing your homework, knowing what herbicide to use, the timing of when you should do this and when you should not do it. What do you gain from all this? You gain so much. The benefits are just out of this world. And just like this site right here, there was a lot of Tree of Heaven, there was barberry, there was other invasives, and there's still plenty of work to do to keep the management of the invasives out of this site. But when you release those native plants, they're no longer fighting for sun, they're no longer fighting for energy, the nutrients in the soil. And this is just like a site that's a couple years old. Cody went in here and just attacked it. And just from him doing that, we have, you look around here, we have greenbrier, we have regular just blackberry, we have forbs, we have grasses. All this stuff, if he would have not gotten in here and attacked it like you're supposed to, this would be a solid stand of invasives, and all this right here would be competing against it, and trust me, it would lose, because invasives, they're just really competitive. And just do little things. It's amazing the benefit that you get from it, especially the wildlife that will use this site. Just that alone is a win.
So we started this episode off with a question, and it was kind of to get you to stop and think, and we kind of arrived at a different answer that the question was intended to accomplish, and that is that managing non-native invasive species on your property is arguably the most important thing you can do for the habitat and the wildlife that call it home. And we kind of walked you through the process in general of what managing non-native invasives looks like, from the very beginning, bringing out a forester or a certified forester or a professional to walk you through the process of identifying what species are problematic and how to treat those species. We talked about the different methodology and how, when and where and how to do them, from girdling to hack and squirt, basal spray. And of course we talked about the tangible physical benefits that you can see and observe in releasing natives and how wildlife respond to native plant species, which is the ultimate end goal and the name of the game, really. But more than anything else, removing non-native invasive species off of your property, it starts with a decision, and that decision is to take what you have and leave it better than you found it, which is the essence of wildlife management, of conservation, of land stewardship. And it's a lot of work. It can be overwhelming. And the main thing to keep reminding yourself is to not let it be intimidating, because it is a never-ending process. No matter how hard you hit it one year, they're going to come back the next year. The impressive thing about non-native invasives is the amount of seed that they put out. So whether we like it or not, they're in the seed bank, and they're going to be there for a long time. So we can clean an area out and they're going to keep coming back, but we got to stay on top of them. But again, it's just a decision to realize that it's a fight worth fighting, and to not let yourself be overwhelmed, because it is so much work. When you look at your property, don't try to do the entire piece of property in one year, because you're going to get burned out. You're going to feel defeated. Break it up into quadrants. Manage an acre or two at a time in this block. Manage an acre or two at a time over here. Identify a certain species and say, you know, this year I'm really going to hit autumn olive hard, and then next year I'm really going to get after the stilt grass. And then manage your expectations and your goals and what you can accomplish realistically as you're managing non-native invasives, because it is a lot of work. We've mentioned it. It's not for the faint of heart, but for the habitat and the wildlife that call it home, it is absolutely necessary and a critical part of your wildlife management journey. But at the end of the day, as much work as it is, for me, it's satisfying work. It's sweat equity, but it is work that I enjoy. But at the end of the day, you got to remind yourself to have fun, enjoy it, smile while you're out there, be grateful for the opportunity to get out, stretch your legs, manage habitat, and enjoy wildlife. And just as it is for you, it is for me. Wildlife is our way of life.